now, but that has just been getting better and better and making it a lot easier for people to manage their books by recording expenses that they have every month, going to the same QuickBooks account by using rules. And essentially, rules are another name for automations. And basically, all you're looking for is for transactions that match a certain criteria that you set. As long as it matches that criteria, it's going to record the transaction in whatever account using whatever vendor name that you choose every time it hits your bank. So now's a great time to kind of set those kind of rules, because you can see the transactions that are happening every single month. You can also see the description from the bank, which is very important in the rules, because that's often what we're looking for to have the automation kind of set off. So let's scroll through our expenses. I've kind of organized everything or sorted everything by the description. I'll change this to money out. So I only want to see expenses, and I'm sorting by description so that I can see transactions with common bank detail. All right, so if I click on this, I see Pico is definitely a good candidate. I see Pico happens every single month. Looks like multiple times a month, but it definitely has the same exact bank description every time, even if the amounts aren't the same. So Pico is a good one. Looks like these iHeartRadio purchases. Sure, these are actual purchases of radio. These are advertising purchases. Those are good ones to use as well. QuickBooks, that's a good fee that happens every month that I can just categorize. Stripe merchant processing fee, that's a great one that I can use. And then this Sovereign Realty, this is our real estate holding. So this is our rent payments every month, basically. So those can also be categorized automatically. All right, so let's start with Pico. Let's just narrow it down by searching Pico. All right, so now I'm only looking at these 10 transactions. So what I'm going to do is open up one transaction. I'm going to simulate what I would do to record the actual transaction. So I'm going to pick my vendor of Pico, which doesn't exist. I will add them quickly. So they are a vendor, company name Pico. I don't need any other info. And the account we're going to record that to is utilities. That also doesn't exist, so I will add that as well. Find an expense item, because this is not a cost of goods that we sold. This is not an expense directly related to sales. This is one of those overhead expenses. Pico is something we're going to have whether we're running $1 million business or whether we're not making any sales, right? So it's going to be the same transaction every single month. The amounts are just going to be a little bit different depending on how many lights we have turned on. So I will keep that in utilities. And I will pick it again. All right, so now what I like to do, you see under bank detail, it tells you exactly what downloads from the bank. So what I'd like to do is I like to highlight or select the actual text directly from the bank, directly as it comes from the bank. And once I have that copied, I just Control-C that. I'm going to click Create a Rule. And this is going to say, well, the first thing I have to do is call it something. So what do you want to name this rule? Let's just call it Pico. And I'm going to apply this rule for any transaction that is money out of an account. So two options here are money in or money out. And this is kind of all the steps that this automation is going to be looking for in order to trigger the actual recording of the transaction. So if it's a money out, and you can also pick specific bank accounts or credit cards. In my case, I always like to pick all bank accounts, all credit cards, everything that I have linked, just in case I switch it over to a credit card or something changes where I need to link up a new account. The actual automations and rules will still stay. And then we say, look for all or any of the following. So for the most part, I choose all because I like to use the bank text. So I'm only looking specifically for transactions with bank text, not an amount, not a description. Remember, description is what QuickBooks guesses. So that's just the Pico up here. But the Pico Energy util is what actually was downloaded from the bank as the bank detail. So I'm only looking for items with bank text of Pico Energy util. And I can add another condition here. If I want amounts that are greater than 100, I put them in a certain account. If they're less than 100, I put them in another account. You can get very granular with what you're looking for and where you want it to go. But I like to keep it as simple as possible because it just makes, it just helps to eliminate a lot of the confusion that the rule might have under certain circumstances. So after you kind of set all this, all these criteria, it's money out of any bank account with this bank description, bank text, then you want to hit test rule because you want to see that this is actually picking up all of those Pico transactions. So if I hit test rule, it'll look at what we have downloaded and tell you that this rule will apply to 10 unreviewed transactions, which is these 10. That's exactly what we want. So then we tell it where do you want it, where to assign it, right? Where do we want to put it? We want it to be an expense, not a transfer, a check, or a credit card payment. We want it to go to utilities, which is the account that we just set up. If you want it to split between more than one account, you can always do that here. You can split by percentage or exact amount. You can say always send $50 to utilities and the remainder to shipping or something like that. In this case, I always do 100% for the most part. So I'm sending this one to utilities and my payee, the vendor, is going to be Pico. Now, the final decision you have to make, do you want everything to add automatically? So as soon as it downloads from the bank, it gets sent right into utilities without you having to hit accept. Do you want to give it that power? If not, you can unselect it. It won't auto add, but it will categorize it with the actual category and the payee for you. So all you have to do is add, but at least you have the assurance that you see it coming through. Some people like to just review the amounts to make sure they're reasonable. For Pico, I'm going to send it automatically. I don't really care. It is something I have to pay, but I don't need to review each bill in particular. So I'm just going to send it, add it automatically as soon as it downloads from the bank. So as soon as I hit save, it should recognize these 10 transactions, match this rule, and it should record them for us automatically. I'm going to hit save. It's going to look at those 10 transactions and record them for us. You can see this went down by 10. If I search for Pico, nothing shows anymore. If I look in categorized, search for Pico, you can see that all these transactions have been recorded already to utilities without me having to do anything. And another good tip is you want to always keep an eye on this third column, this other column here, the rule column, because it'll tell you if a rule was applied and if it was auto added. And anytime you see a rule reference with a link, you can click on it and it'll take you right back to that rule. So if you need to edit anything or see what's going on or see why it's not working, or you want to change the fact that it's an auto add, you can do that right in here just by clicking on that rule link. All right, so let's do another one. We said iHeartRadio was another good example. This time we'll do it without the auto add. We'll go a little bit quicker, but we're not going to automatically add it. So Pico we did. All right, so iHeartRadio. Anytime you have to, you search for a transaction, you always have to hit enter. Sometimes I forget that, but you can see here that it is actually showing you the results for iHeart. So that's how you know you did it correctly. So we're going to add them. iHeartRadio, vendor, perfect. This is for advertising. I don't have that as an account either, so I'm going to add that as an expense account. Advertising, and then I'm going to copy this, create a rule. We're going to call this just iHeartRadio instead of ACH. This is going to be money out as well from all bank accounts. And the bank text, I don't really care that it says ACH purchase. Honestly, as long as the bank text has iHeartRadio somewhere in it, as long as it contains iHeartRadio, then I think this rule is good enough to kind of go off on its own. And again, we have 10 transactions that this rule will apply to. One other thing I probably didn't mention, on this contains, anything with an arrow is obviously a drop down. You can say is exactly this bank text or doesn't contain this. So there might be certain circumstances where you have to add a condition where it contains this but not this. That's where you would use that drop down. For the most part, I feel like bank text and contains fits most of the rules that you'll be creating. This is an expense to advertising, iHeartRadio. Perfect. So the only thing I'm going to do is uncheck the auto add and hit save. Now we won't see those iHeart transactions go away, but what we will see is that the rule was applied. So in theory, all we have to do is hit add and then we'll be good to go. But what I'm not seeing here is a payee or a category. Probably just a little glitch. Let's refresh and see if that fixes it. It's working hard on those rules. Working hard. All right. Search iHeart. That's what I wanted to see. All right. So now we see there's a rule applied. You can see that from the indication here. The payee is iHeartRadio and the category is advertising. All you have to do is click through here, add. Or like I did before, you can select them all. Since you already changed the payee and category, you don't need to edit them at all. Just hit accept. Now if I look at my reports, you'll see that those Pico utility transactions are recorded properly, as are the advertising expenses. So here's my advertising of $12,000 and our utilities from Pico of $4,900. So that rule creation is super helpful because as you go on, it's just going to be more and more transactions. So anything that you can kind of file away without even having to think about or think, where did I put that? Did I put it under electric? Did I put it under Pico? Did I put it under utilities? Anything you can kind of set and then forget about will be helpful when you're trying to record all of those transactions. So you can see all of our Pico transactions are listed here. And there's nothing really on the P&L that indicates whether or not it was recorded with a rule or not. As far as anyone else knows, it just got in here by you manually adding it. So one more thing, under the transactions, there is a tab for rules. I'll click on that. And this shows you all of the rules that you have created, just in case you need to edit anything or change anything. If you realize something isn't working properly, you can fix it here, or you can pause rules as well if you don't want them to be applied. But I'm just on the other tab. Bank transactions is where we record everything. I'm on the rules tab. So this is where you can actually disable if you don't want it to actually keep applying that rule. You can delete that rule if you want, or you can just hit edit and you can edit the rule. If you want to change the vendor name, you want to change the category, anything you want to change, you can at any time. And any rules that you change, don't change anything in the past, only things going forward. So you don't have to worry about messing with transactions that were already recorded. If they were put somewhere, that's where they're going to stay unless you move them. Anything that you mess with on the rule side is just handling future transactions. All right, so I think that's all about rules. The same can be done for income items, although I don't really recommend it because those can sometimes be tricky with invoices that you might need to match, or making sure transactions into your business bank account are actually sales and not just, money that you were loaned or anything odd like that might accidentally get recorded as sales. That's why we try to stay away from using rules on the sales side of things. However, for expenses, especially for overhead expenses that are the same vendors every month, it's a perfect candidate for setting up rules. All right, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.